James and Olivia Carter had what many considered a picture-perfect marriage. Living in the quiet town of Maplewood, they seemed like the ideal couple. James, a 38-year-old architect, was well respected in his field, known for designing elegant homes across the city. Olivia, a 35-year-old elementary school teacher, was loved by her students and admired by her colleagues. Their 10-year marriage appeared to be filled with love, laughter, and stability. Neighbors often saw them jogging together in the mornings, attending community events, and hosting small gatherings at their beautifully decorated home. But as with many seemingly perfect relationships, there were hidden fractures beneath the surface, ones that no one outside their home truly understood. As January came to an end, the town was preparing for the upcoming Valentine's Day festivities. Local shops displayed heart-shaped decorations, and restaurants advertised special couples dinners. Olivia's friends recalled how she had been excited about planning something special for James. She had mentioned booking a weekend getaway, a small romantic trip to rekindle their relationship. But those who knew her well had also noticed a change in her demeanor in recent months. She had become quieter, less vibrant, as if something was weighing on her mind. At work, she sometimes appeared distracted, though she always maintained her warm and kind personality. A few close friends asked if everything was all right at home, but Olivia brushed off their concerns with a smile, insisting that she was just stressed with work. James, on the other hand, had been acting differently too. Once a charming and attentive husband, he had become distant. His long work hours had extended even further, and he seemed preoccupied, always on his phone or locked away in his home office. Friends and neighbors noticed fewer public displays of affection between the couple, and Olivia had stopped posting about their life together on social media, something she used to do regularly. Still, no one thought much of it. After all, every marriage has ups and downs. On January 31st, Olivia had a normal day at work. She taught her students as usual, sent emails to parents, and even stayed after school to help a struggling student. As she left the school building, security cameras captured her walking to her car, wearing a thick winter coat and carrying a tote bag. There was nothing unusual about her movements. She got into her car, started the engine, and drove off. That was the last time anyone saw her alive. When Olivia didn't show up for work the next morning, her co-workers grew concerned. She had never been the type to miss school without notifying someone in advance. Calls to her phone went straight to voicemail. Her best friend, Emily, drove to Olivia's house, hoping she had simply overslept or fallen ill. But when she knocked on the door, there was no answer. James' car was in the driveway, but there was no sign of Olivia. Hours later, after multiple failed attempts to reach her, Olivia's family reported her missing. The search for her began, but no one knew that the truth behind her disappearance was far more sinister than they could have imagined. The police wasted no time launching an investigation into Olivia Carter's disappearance. Officers arrived at the Carter home, where James answered the door looking exhausted and distraught. He told them he had fallen asleep early the previous night and hadn't realized Olivia never came home. His voice trembled as he explained that he had assumed she had left early for work in the morning. He seemed shocked when officers told him that Olivia never arrived at the school that day. The investigation moved quickly. Officers checked Olivia's phone records, but there had been no outgoing calls or messages since she left work. Her bank accounts remained untouched. There was no activity on her social media, and her family and friends insisted she would never just disappear without telling anyone. Olivia was known for being responsible and organized, someone who always let people know where she was going. The situation didn't make sense. 2 days later, police found Olivia's car abandoned in a parking lot 2 miles from her home. The doors were locked, and her purse was still inside, along with a half-empty water bottle and a few receipts. Strangely, her phone was missing, and her car keys were nowhere to be found. There were no visible signs of struggle, no broken glass, no blood, nothing to suggest she had been taken by force. The location of the car only deepened the mystery. Why would Olivia park her car there and then vanish? As investigators searched for answers, James made a tearful public plea for his wife's return. Standing outside their home, he addressed reporters with reddened eyes, his voice cracking as he begged for anyone with information to come forward. He described Olivia as a loving, dedicated woman who would never leave without saying a word. His pain seemed real, but something about his behavior unsettled some of those who watched him. While some saw a grieving husband, others noticed how his tears seemed to stop the moment cameras were turned off. Days turned into weeks, and still, there were no solid leads. Police interviewed Olivia's colleagues, friends, and family members, searching for any clue that might explain her disappearance. Some of her closest friends mentioned that she had been unhappy lately, that she had confided in them about tension in her marriage. But without evidence of wrongdoing, there was little investigators could do. Detectives considered the possibility that Olivia had left on her own. Perhaps she had been overwhelmed with stress and needed time away. But nothing about her personality or behavior suggested she would abandon her life so suddenly. If she had run away, why had she left behind her belongings? Why had she made plans for Valentine's Day, which she had been excited about just weeks earlier? The theory didn't add up. As hope of finding her alive began to fade, the case grew cold. The search slowed down, and the news cycle moved on. But Olivia's family refused to give up. They continued searching, putting up missing person flyers and pleading for information. Unbeknownst to them, Olivia was far closer than anyone realized, buried beneath the earth, hidden from sight, waiting to be found. 5 years passed, and Olivia Carter's disappearance became another unsolved case in the Maplewood Police Department's files. Her name still lingered in the minds of those who had known her, but with no new evidence. The investigation had faded into the background. Her family never stopped searching for answers, but as time went on, even they began to fear that the truth would never come to light. James Carter, once the grieving husband, had moved away just a year after Olivia's disappearance. He sold their home and relocated to another state, where he started a new job and built a new life, far from the whispers that had once followed him. Then, on a cold February morning, everything changed. A hiker exploring a remote wooded area nearly 40 miles from Maplewood stumbled upon something unusual. At first it looked like nothing more than a disturbed patch of earth, but as he moved closer, he saw what appeared to be fragments of cloth sticking out from the soil. When he brushed away the loose dirt, his stomach dropped beneath the surface. A human skull was partially exposed. Shocked, he immediately called the police. Detectives arrived at the scene and carefully excavated the area. What they uncovered sent chills through the entire department. The remains belonged to a woman, her body bound in deteriorated duct tape, buried in a shallow grave. She had been wrapped in a tarp that had partially disintegrated over the years, but traces of it still clung to her bones. Forensic analysts worked quickly, running tests on the remains. Within days, the confirmation came the body belonged to Olivia Carter. News of the discovery spread quickly. Olivia's family was devastated, but they finally had an answer to the question that had haunted them for years. However, the most pressing question remained: who had put her there? The state of the remains made it difficult to determine an exact cause of death, but evidence suggested she had suffered blunt force trauma. It was now officially a homicide investigation. Detectives reopened the case, poring over old evidence and re-interviewing key individuals. One detail stood out: traces of duct tape found on Olivia's body were from a rare brand, not commonly sold in major stores. Investigators searched for any record of someone connected to Olivia purchasing that brand in the months leading up to her disappearance. That's when they found something crucial: a receipt from 5 years ago, belonging to James Carter. He had purchased that exact brand of duct tape for a supposed home renovation project just weeks before Olivia went missing. It was the first real lead in years, but investigators needed more. They expanded their search, looking into James' activities at the time of Olivia's disappearance. Credit card records showed he had also bought a tarp and a shovel just days before January 31st. When they checked his GPS history, another disturbing fact emerged: his phone had been in the same remote forest where Olivia's body was found on the night she vanished. For years, James had lived freely, but now the evidence was beginning to close in on him. With fresh evidence linking James Carter to the crime, detectives intensified their investigation. They meticulously reconstructed his movements from the days before Olivia's disappearance to the weeks that followed. Surveillance footage from a local hardware store showed James purchasing the tarp and shovel, the same ones used to conceal Olivia's body. Though 5 years had passed, his transactions left a trail that could not be erased. Investigators also revisited the initial crime scene, Olivia's abandoned car. They had collected evidence from the vehicle years ago, but now, with advances in forensic technology, they re-examined the items inside. A small strand of rope found in the trunk was tested, revealing fibers identical to those used to bind Olivia's wrists. The rope was a match to a batch sold at a store near James' former office, a store he frequently visited. The case against him was growing stronger. Detectives also looked into James' life after Olivia's disappearance. They discovered that he had filed for life insurance benefits just months after she went missing, claiming financial hardship. Though Olivia's case had remained unsolved, James had continued living his life, moving to a new city, getting a new job, and even entering another relationship. His actions painted the picture of a man who had moved on too quickly, a man who had something to hide. When police brought him in for questioning, James maintained his innocence. He expressed shock at Olivia's body being found, claiming he had no idea how she ended up in that forest. He insisted that his purchases of the tarp rope and duct tape had been for home repairs, and that his trip near the crime scene was purely coincidental. But detectives were no longer buying his story. They had enough circumstantial evidence to move forward. Forensic experts conducted further analysis on Olivia's remains, and a breakthrough came when they examined the deteriorated tape around her wrists. Despite years of exposure, faint fingerprints were recovered from the adhesive layer. When tested, they matched James Carter. It was the final piece of the puzzle, the physical evidence that directly tied him to the crime. Authorities obtained a warrant for James's arrest, and 5 years after Olivia's disappearance, he was taken into custody. His once perfect life came crashing down as news of his arrest spread. The same man who had tearfully pleaded for his wife's safe return was now facing charges for her murder. The town of Maplewood, which had once sympathized with the grieving husband, now saw him as a cold-blooded killer who had managed to evade justice for years. The prosecution prepared for trial, building a case that left little room for doubt. They argued that James had killed Olivia in their home, likely following an argument, then staged her disappearance to make it look like she had simply vanished. They believed he had driven to the remote forest that same night, burying her in a shallow grave before returning home and acting as though nothing had happened. Now, after 5 years, the truth was finally coming to light. As James Carter sat in his jail cell awaiting trial, the weight of his past choices finally began to catch up with him. What had once seemed like the perfect crime was now unraveling piece by piece. Prosecutors wasted no time in presenting a strong case against him, backed by forensic evidence, financial records, and a timeline that pointed to his guilt. Olivia's family, who had endured years of unanswered questions, attended every court session, determined to see justice served. The trial began with the prosecution laying out their argument. James had killed Olivia in a calculated act, staging her disappearance to avoid suspicion. They presented the receipt for the tarp, shovel, and duct tape, linking him to the burial materials. They displayed the forensic report showing that his fingerprints had been found on the tape binding Olivia's wrists. They even played security footage from the hardware store, showing James purchasing the exact materials used in the crime. Piece by piece, they painted the picture of a man who had not only killed his wife, but had spent years believing he had gotten away with it. The defense attempted to counter the claims, arguing that the evidence was circumstantial. They insisted that James had no reason to harm Olivia and suggested that someone else could have used his purchased materials to commit the crime. They pointed out that no one had actually witnessed him committing the act. However, the jury remained unconvinced. The weight of the evidence, combined with James's own inconsistent statements over the years, left little room for doubt. The most damning revelation came when prosecutors introduced James' financial records. They revealed that just months before Olivia's disappearance, he had taken out a sizable life insurance policy on her. The payout would have been enough to clear his growing debts and provide him with financial security. This, the prosecution argued, was his motive. James had seen Olivia not as a loving wife, but as a way out of his financial troubles. After weeks of testimonies, expert analyses, and emotional statements from Olivia's family, the case was handed over to the jury. It took them only 2 days to reach a verdict. When James stood before the court, the decision was read aloud: guilty of first-degree murder. He showed little emotion as the words echoed through the courtroom. His years of deception, carefully crafted lies, and attempts to evade justice had finally come to an end. The judge sentenced James to life in prison, without the possibility of parole. Olivia's family, though heartbroken, finally had the closure they had long sought. The town of Maplewood, once captivated by Olivia's mysterious disappearance, now had the truth. She had been murdered by the very person who was supposed to love and protect her. As James was led away in handcuffs, the world moved on, but the memory of Olivia Carter remained. Her story became a reminder that even the most carefully hidden crimes can be uncovered, and that justice, no matter how long it takes, always finds a way.